Let me ask you about small teams. So you mentioned Jason a bunch of times, Jason Fried. You have been partners for a long, long time. Perhaps it's fair to say he's more on the sort of the design business side, and you're like the tech, the engineering wizard. How have you guys, over all these years, creating so many amazing products, not murder each other? It's a great story of like partnership. What can you say about collaboration? What can you say about Jason that you love, that you've learned from? Why does this work?
So first I'll say we have tried to murder each other several times over the years, but far less, I think, in the last decade. In the early days, our product discussions were so fierce that when we were having them in the office and there were other employees around, some of them were legitimately worried that the company was about to fall apart because the volume coming out of the room would be so high and sound so acrimonious that they were legitimately worried the whole thing was going to fall apart. But you know what's funny is that it never felt like that in the moment. It always felt like just a peak, vigorous search for something better. And that we were able to stomach that level of adversity on the merits of an idea because it was about the idea. It wasn't about the person. And it never really got personal. Not even never really. It didn't get personal. It wasn't like, Jason, you're an asshole. It was like, Jason, you're an idiot. And you're an idiot because you're looking at this problem the wrong way. And let me tell you the right way to do it.
As a small tangent, let me say that some people have said, and we'll probably return to this, that you're sometimes can have flights of temper on the internet and so on. I never take it that way because it is the same kind of ilk. Maybe I haven't seen the right kind of traces of temper, but usually it's about the idea, and it's just excited, passionate human.
That's exactly what I like to think of it as. It doesn't always come across as that.
Okay.
And I can see why spectators in particular sometimes would see something that looks like I'm going after the man rather than the ball. And I do think I've tried to get better at that. But in my relationship with Jason, I think it's worked so well because we have our own distinct areas of competence where we fully trust each other. Jason trusts me to make the correct technical decisions. I trust him to make the correct design and product direction decisions. And then we can overlap and share on the business, on marketing, on writing, on other aspects of it. So that's one thing, is that if you're starting a business with someone where you do exactly the same as they do, and you're constantly contesting who's the more competent person, I think that's far more difficult and far more volatile. So if you're starting a business and you're both programmers and you both work on the same kind of programming, good luck. I think that's hard. I tried to pick an easier path working with a designer where I knew that at least half of the time I could just delegate to his experience and competence and say, like, you know what? I may have an opinion. I have an opinion all the time on design, but I don't have to win the argument because I trust you. Now, occasionally we would have overlaps on business or direction where we'd both feel like we had a strong stake in the game and we both had a claim to competence in that area. But then for whatever reason, we also both had a long-term vision where I would go, do you know what? I think we're wrong here. But as I learned from Jeff Bezos, by the way, I'm going to disagree and commit. That was one of those early lessons he gave us that was absolutely crucial and perhaps even instrumental in ensuring that Jason and I have been working together for a quarter of a century. Disagree and commit is one of the all-time Jeff Bezos greats.
I'm just surprised that Yoko Ono hasn't come along. You know what I mean? Like there's there's so many Yokos in this world.
It might have happened, if not in part because we don't sit on each other's lap all the time. Most of our careers, we haven't even lived in the same city. Like, I lived in Chicago for a couple of years while we were getting going after I'd moved to the US in 2005. But then I moved to Malibu, and then I lived in Spain, and then I lived in Copenhagen. And Jason and I, from the foundation of our relationship, learned how to work together in a remarkably efficient way where we didn't have to actually talk that much. On any given week, I'd be surprised if Jason and I spent more than 2 hours of direct exchange and communication.
Yeah, sometimes it's the basic human frictions that
Yes.
just
I think if
accumulate
you
over
rub
time.
up against another person, that person damn well better be your spouse if it's too much for too long.
Yeah, but even there,
Even there,
COVID has really tested the relationship. It's fascinating to watch.
it has. And I do think that having some separation, which is kind of counterintuitive, because I think a lot of people think the more collaboration you can have, the better. The more ideas that can bounce back and forth, the better. And both Jason and I, for whatever reason, came to the conclusion early on in careers, absolutely not. That's complete baloney. This is why we were huge proponents of remote work. This is why I enjoy working in my home office where I can close the door and not see another human for like 6 hours at the time. I don't want to bounce ideas off you all the time. I want to bounce ideas off you occasionally, and then I want to go off and implement those ideas. There's way too much bouncing going on and not enough scoring, not enough dunking. And I think this is one of the great traps of executive rule. Once a founder elevates themselves all the way up to an executive, where what they're doing is just telling other people what to do, that's the realm they live in 24/7. They just live in the idea realm. Oh, I can just tell more people more things what to do, and we can just see it happen. If you actually have to be part of implementing that, you slow your horse. You think like, you know what? I had a good idea last week. I'm going to save the rest of my good ideas until next month.
And there is a temptation for the managers and for the people in the executive layer to do something, which that something usually means a meeting,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so that's why you say,
Their job is telling other people what to do.
yeah. And the meeting, so this is one of the big things you're against, is
Meetings are toxic.
Yeah.
And this really, I think, ties into this with Jason and I. If I had to count out the total number of meetings we've had in 24 years of collaborations where we in person sat in front of each other and discussed a topic, it'd be less than 3 months at a fan company. We just haven't done that much. We haven't worn it out. One of these funny metaphors that Trump came up with at one point was a human has like a limited number of steps in their life, right? Like that's the longevity argument here. You can do so much activity and then you run out. There's some kernel in that idea that can be applied to relationship. There's some amount of exchange we can have. There's some amount of time we can spend together where you can wear it out. Jason and I were diligent about not wearing each other out. And I think that is absolutely key to the longevity of the relationship, combined with that level of trust, and then just combining with the level that we really like the work itself. We don't just like the brainstorming, the says where we just come up with good ideas. No, we like to do the ideas, and we like to be part of that process directly ourselves. I like to program. He likes to do design. We could go off and do our little things for long stretches of time. Occasionally come together and go like, hey, let's launch a great product.
This might sound like I'm asking you to do therapy, but I find myself to sometimes want or long for a meeting because I'm lonely. Like, because remote work, just sitting by yourself, I don't know, it can get really lonely for long stretches of time.
Let me give you a tip.
Uh-huh.
Get a wife.
Yes. God damn it.
Get a couple kids.
All right.
Like family really is the great antidote to loneliness. And I mean that as sincerely as I can possibly say it. I certainly had exactly that feeling you described early in my career when I was working remotely. And I was just like me living in an apartment, a total stereotype where for the longest time when I first moved to Chicago, all I had on the floor was a mattress. And then I bought this big TV and I didn't even mount it. And then I had a stack of DVDs. And I was working a lot of the time, and then I would just go home and I'd do that, and it wasn't great. It really wasn't. Like, I do think that humans need humans, and if you can't get them at work, and I actually sort of kind of don't want them at work, at least I don't want them for 40 hours a week. That's not what I prefer. You need something else. You need other relationships in your life, and there's no greater depth of relationship if you can find someone that you actually just want to spend a lot of time with. That's key to it, and I think it's key for both Jason and I that we've had families for quite a long time, and it grounds you too in a way where the sprint of a startup can get traded in for the marathon of an enduring company. And you get settled in a way. We talked briefly about sometimes I get fired up. I mean, a lot of times, maybe even most of the times I get fired up about topics. But I don't get fired up in the same way now as I used to when I was 24. I'm still extremely passionate about ideas and trying to find the right things. But having a family, meeting my wife, building a life around that has just mellowed everything out in a completely cliche way. But it, I think it's actually key. I think if we could get more, even younger people, not to wait until they were in their late goddamn 30s or early 40s to hitch up with someone, we'd be better off and we'd have more stable business relationships as well, because folks would get that nurturing human relation somewhere else. Now, when I say all of that, I also accept that there are plenty of great businesses that's been built over the years that have not been built remote, that have been built by a gang of hooligans sitting in an office for immense hours of time. I mean, both John Carmack and Tim Sweeney talked about that in the 90s with their careers, that was just basically work, sleep, hang out with the guys at the office, right? Totally fair. That never appealed to me. Both Jason and I saw eye to eye on the idea that 40 hours a week dedicated to work was enough. That if we were going to go to distance for not just the 5 to 7 years it takes to build a VC case up to an exit, but for potentially 10 years, 20 years, or further, we needed to become whole humans, because only that whole humanness was going to go to distance, which included building up friendships outside of work, having hobbies, finding a mate, and having a family. And that entire existence, those legs of the stool, that work is not the only thing in life, is completely related to the fact that we've been around for 25 years. There's way too much, especially in America, of false trade-offs. Oh, you want to build a successful business? Well, you can either have money, enjoyment, family, or health. Pick one. What? Why do we have to give up all of this? Now, again, I'm not saying there are moments, periods in life where you can sprint, but I am saying if that sprint turns into a decade, you're going to pay for it. And you're going to pay for it in ways I've seen time and again seemed like a very bad trade. That even if it works, and by the way, most of the time it does not. Most of the time startups go bust. Most of the time people spend 5-7 years or something that does not pan out, and they don't get the payout. And then they just sit with regret of like, what the fuck happened to my 20s? Early on, Jason and I basically made the pact that working together was not going to lead to that kind of regret. That we were going to allow ourselves and each other to build a whole life outside of work. And the fact that that worked is something I feel is almost like forbidden knowledge. Certainly in technology circles in the US, it's something that we've tried to champion for 20 years and we still get slacked for. Just 2 days ago, I had another Twitter beef with someone saying like, oh, well, okay, maybe it worked, but you didn't turn into Atlassian, so you're a failure. Basecamp isn't Jira, so why are you even bothering? And it's such a fascinating winner-takes-all mentality that unless you dominate everyone else in all the ways, you've lost. When so much of life is far more open to multiple winners, where we can end up with a business that have made hundreds of millions of dollars over the years, and we've kept much of that to do whatever we want, and that's enough, that's good, that's great, that's actually something worth aspiring to. Certainly, it should be a path for someone to consider choosing rather than the VC unicorn and bust mentality that dominates everything.